You can judge me. Really, go ahead. I've already judged myself 1,000 times over. Called myself every name in the book. Stared at the ceiling night after night wondering how I let it happen. But the truth is, most people don't wake up planning to destroy their lives. It doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks up on you in the quiet, in the ordinary, like a whisper in the hallway. A look that lingers just a little too long. A touch that feels too innocent, until it doesn't. See, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just trying to survive another Tuesday. You know those days? Where you wake up next to someone who doesn't see you anymore, put on the same robe, pour the same cup of coffee, and go through life like you're on autopilot? That was me. 45. Married to a man who hadn't touched me, really touched me in years. Mom to a son who barely said more than 3 words unless he needed money. I didn't feel like a woman anymore. Just a fixture in the house. A shadow in the hallway. Until he walked in. He wasn't supposed to be more than a guest. Jake, my son's best friend. He needed a place to stay after his parents split. My son begged, said it was temporary. I said yes, because that's what mothers do. But what I didn't expect was him. Not like that. I didn't expect the way he'd smile at me like I mattered. How he'd actually listen when I talked, like I was interesting, like I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. He'd help around the house, ask if I was okay, stand a little too close sometimes. At first, I thought I was imagining it. God, I wanted to be imagining it. But then came that morning. It was early, maybe 6:30. The sun was barely up, just spilling gold through the window slats. I padded into the kitchen in my robe, hair a mess, thinking I'd have the place to myself. And there he was. Jake, half naked, standing at the counter, shirtless, barefoot, pouring himself a cup of my husband's favorite coffee. Like he'd done it 100 times before. I froze. I mean, what do you do when you walk in on something like that? He turned. Our eyes locked. He didn't flinch. Didn't look embarrassed. He just smiled. Soft, confident. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. And I swear to God, in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I wasn't thinking about anyone else in the world. It was just me and him and the deafening sound of my heartbeat in my ears. That day, that was the beginning of everything. And the end of everything I thought I knew. You think you know what you do in a moment like that. But trust me, until it's your life unraveling in slow motion, you have no idea how far you'll fall just to feel seen again. My name's Diane, 45, married for 22 years. Mother of one, Nathan. He's 20 and barely home anymore. My days? They all started to blur into one long sigh. Chores, groceries, laundry, dinner by 7. Conversations that felt more like calendar reminders than real connection. My husband, Mark. He used to be warm. He used to make me feel like the center of his world. But somewhere between the promotions, the business trips, and the long silences, he stopped looking at me like I was his. Started looking through me instead. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. Just invisible. Until Jake moved in. Jake. He was Nathan's best friend since middle school. He'd been around for years, sleepovers, birthday parties, backyard barbecues. Always respectful, always polite. A good kid. But that fall, something changed. His parents split up, messy divorce, the kind that leaves bruises you can't see. Nathan asked if Jake could crash with us for a while. Just until things settled. And of course, I said yes. That's what moms do, right? We take care of everybody else. I didn't think twice. I should have. He moved into the guest room downstairs, just a backpack, a duffel bag, and a sad pair of sneakers. And for the first week or so, it was quiet. He kept to himself. Helped Nathan with school stuff. Did his own laundry. Polite, clean, kind. But then, I remember it so clearly Thursday. Late afternoon. I came home from the store, arms full of groceries. No one was supposed to be home. Mark was still at work, Nathan at class. I fumbled with the keys, nearly dropped the milk. And then, Jake opened the front door for me. "Here, let me get that, Mrs. D," he said, and took every bag from my hands like it was nothing. Mrs. D. That's what he'd always called me. But that day, the way he said it, it felt different, like the words wrapped around me. He brought everything into the kitchen, unloaded the bags, and started talking. About some philosophy class he was taking, about a professor who reminded him of Gandalf, and how Nathan was struggling to keep up with the reading. He made me laugh. Really laugh. The kind that sneaks out of you before you can stop it. And that's when it happened. I looked up at him, just for a second, and he smiled. Slow, soft, eyes focused. Then he said it. "You look really pretty when you laugh, Mrs. D." I froze. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it was honest. Not flirty, not sleazy, just true. I hadn't heard those words in years. Not from my husband. Not from anyone. I brushed it off, of course. Laughed it away. Changed the subject, turned back to the cutting board. But something stayed with me. Not just the compliment, but the way he looked at me. Like I wasn't invisible. Like I was still something beautiful. Something worth noticing. That night at dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I watched Jake laugh with Nathan across the table, the way he teased him, the way he listened when I spoke, actually listened. And for a flicker of a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Seen. Alive. Wanted. It was subtle at first. Jake would stay behind after dinner to help me clean up. We'd talk about books, movies, his dreams, his heartbreak over his parents. And I'd find myself lingering just a little longer, smiling a little wider. I started noticing things. The way he always offered to carry heavy things. The way he remembered how I took my tea. The way he never looked at his phone when I was speaking, like every word I said mattered. And then there were the small touches. His hand brushing mine when we reached for the same spoon. A gentle nudge against my shoulder when he cracked a joke. The way his eyes lingered, never long enough to cross a line, but just long enough to stir something inside me. Something warm. Something dangerous. I told myself I was imagining it. That he was just being sweet. That I was reading too much into things because I was lonely. But deep down, I knew. Something was shifting. Slow. Delicate. Like the first crack in a dam. He wasn't just Nathan's friend anymore. He wasn't just a guest in my home. He was a mirror. Showing me every part of myself I'd buried to survive my marriage. And the scariest part? I didn't want to look away. At first. I told myself I was being silly. Just a boy being sweet. A little flattery from someone young and kind-hearted. That's all it was, right? But then came the late-night talks. Nathan would head out to a party or pass out early after class. And Jake and I would end up alone in the living room. Just the two of us. TV playing something mindless. That soft, dim glow of the lamp behind the couch. He'd sit next to me, not too close, but not far either. Just enough space for something unspoken to sit between us. And I remember this one night. Nathan had gone to bed early, complaining about a headache. It was just me and Jake on the couch. Some old black and white movie was playing, neither of us really watching. Our knees were almost touching. Almost. I had this blanket draped over me, and Jake reached over to tuck the edge around my feet. Said something like, "Can't have you catching a cold, Mrs. D." His voice was soft. Not teasing. Not joking. Just careful. Gentle. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because suddenly, my heart was beating in places I hadn't felt in years. I started noticing little things. How he'd lean against the counter while I cooked, talking about his classes. Always watching me, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel like the most fascinating woman in the room. He started helping out more. Not because I asked, but because he wanted to. He'd dry the dishes while I washed. We'd bump arms. And every time it happened, neither of us pulled away. Our hands would brush. Our eyes would hold a second too long. The silence afterward always felt louder than anything we said. I told myself it was nothing. Just circumstances, coincidence. But then I caught myself one evening, standing in front of the mirror in my bathroom, reapplying lip gloss before walking into the living room. Lip gloss. I hadn't done that for Mark in over a decade. But there I was, checking the corners of my mouth, smoothing my hair. For a 21-year-old boy who wasn't mine. One night, I made lasagna, his favorite. He said it reminded him of his mom's cooking back when things were good at home. When we sat down to eat, it was just us. Nathan was out again. Jake took a bite, closed his eyes, and smiled. "You always cook like you care," he said. And something about the way he said it made my hands go still on my fork. No one had spoken to me like that in years. Like I mattered. Like the things I did had weight. Had meaning. Later that night, I was folding laundry in the guest room. He had left his clean clothes in the dryer. He walked in without knocking, froze, and I felt heat crawl up my neck. I started to apologize, but he just smiled. "You're always doing things for people," he said, taking the shirts from my hand. "Has anyone ever done that for you?" I didn't know what to say, so I just shook my head and walked out. But that question stayed with me all night. Why was my heart racing? Why did his laugh stay with me hours after he left the room? Why did I feel a pit in my stomach when I heard the door slam behind him, only to feel that same pit turn into butterflies when I heard it open again? I was old enough to know better. Old enough to name every line on my face, every scar behind my smile. But my body, my heart, they didn't care. They only knew what they missed. And what they were beginning to crave. Attention. Softness. Desire. It wasn't physical. Not yet. But something was building. A quiet, slow tension, like static in the air before a storm. We never said anything. Never crossed any lines. But those silences, they started to feel louder than words. Like the night he stood behind me while I loaded the dishwasher. Too close. His breath just barely grazing my shoulder. My fingers fumbling with the plates. Or the time he caught me humming to myself at the sink and said, "You always hum when you're happy. I like that about you." I couldn't look at him after that. Because I knew. I knew exactly what was happening. I was slipping. And part of me, a part one didn't want to admit existed, wasn't fighting it. The storm hit just after 9 p.m. Mark was out of town for work. Nathan had gone to his girlfriend's place. And I was alone in that big, quiet house. I don't know why storms have always gotten to me. Maybe it's the way the sky cracks open, like it's screaming. Maybe it's how small I feel when thunder rattles the walls. The lights flickered twice. Then everything went dark. I fumbled for the candles under the sink, hands shaking, heart racing like I was 12 again. Lit 2. Set them on the kitchen counter. Wrapped both palms around a steaming mug of chamomile like it was the only thing holding me together. Then I heard him. "Mrs. D. Jake." I didn't even hear the door open. But there he was, framed in the flickering candlelight like something out of a memory I hadn't lived yet. Hair damp from the rain. T-shirt clinging just slightly to his chest. Holding a half-empty umbrella like he didn't even remember using it. He stepped into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. Just looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. Lied. "Fine. Just." Storm caught me off guard. He walked in slow, careful. Sat across from me at the kitchen island. Not touching. Not crowding. But his presence filled the room like warmth from the flame. "You're always taking care of everyone," he said. I blinked. Looked at him. He wasn't smiling. "When's the last time someone took care of you?" That question. It hit something deep. Something I had buried so long ago, I didn't even recognize the ache until he gave it a name. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because anything I said would have cracked the surface wide open. He reached out. Slow. Deliberate. His fingers grazed the side of my face, light as air. and tucked a damp strand of hair behind my ear. I didn't move, didn't blink. My eyes fluttered shut, just for a second. Because the way he touched me wasn't hungry or selfish. It was careful, reverent. Like he was holding something breakable. My chest rose, fell. The air felt thick, electric. I could hear every tick of the rain against the window. Every beat of my own heart, loud and clumsy in my ears. I almost leaned in. Almost. But I pulled away. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. I can't, I whispered. My voice was tight. Too thin to hide the shake underneath. He didn't move. Didn't try to close the distance again. Just held my gaze. You don't have to pretend anymore, he said, quiet. Like he already knew what I was going to say before I said it. And for one heartbeat. One long, dangerous heartbeat. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to fall into that warmth, that wanting, that safety he was offering like an open door. Not because he was young. Not because he was new. But because for the first time in years, someone saw me. Not the mother. Not the wife. Not the woman doing dishes and making lists and folding laundry in silence. Me. But then, Nathan. Home early. We both jumped. The air in the room snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight for too long. Jake pulled his hand back. Fast. I stood up, smoothing my shirt, wiping my palms on my jeans like I could erase the moment we'd just shared. Hey, Mom. Nathan's voice rang out from the hallway. I called back, too brightly. Hey, sweetie. Storm got you too. Jake didn't say a word. Just stepped back, nodded once, and disappeared into the hallway like a ghost. That night, I barely slept. I laid in bed listening to the storm roll away. The silence it left behind louder than the thunder that came before. I couldn't stop replaying that moment. His touch. His eyes. The way my body leaned forward before my mind caught up. I had stood at the edge of something I couldn't name, and part of me hated myself for wanting to jump. But the other part? It ached for the fall. I wish I could say I stayed away. I wish I could sit here now and tell you I remembered who I was. That I was a wife. A mother. A woman who knew better. But the truth? The truth is more complicated than right and wrong. Because loneliness. It's a kind of hunger that sneaks up on you. And once it starts whispering in your ear, telling you you're invisible, you start listening. And that night, the house was so still, I could hear the walls breathing. Mark had come back from his trip 2 days earlier. He was in bed, already snoring before I even turned off the light. Same way he always did. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a ghost in my own home. I got up, paced the hallway. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe air. Maybe clarity. Maybe just someone who saw me. And then, I saw him, Jake, standing in the glow of the guest room doorway. T-shirt hanging loose on his frame. Eyes shadowed, voice barely a whisper. You okay? He asked. I should have said yes. I should have gone back to bed, pulled the covers over my shame, and forced sleep to take me. But I didn't. I nodded toward the kitchen. He followed. We didn't turn on the lights. Just stood there, the two of us, with the storm still lingering outside and the silence thick between us. I can't sleep, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, gently, so gently, he said, me neither. We sat down on the couch. No space between us this time. No reasons to pretend we were anything other than two people drowning in the same kind of emptiness. I don't remember who spoke first, but the words came like water bursting through a cracked dam. I feel forgotten, I whispered. Like I'm in the room, but nobody looks. Nobody listens. He nodded. I know the feeling, he said. Sometimes I think if I disappeared, nobody would notice. My chest tightened. It wasn't just about age. It wasn't lust or thrill or some reckless cliché. It was connection. Two broken things recognizing each other's cracks. He turned toward me. His voice was low but steady. You deserve more than this, he said. You deserve to be seen. My hand was on my lap, fingers twisting the hem of my shirt. He reached over, slow, careful, and took it in his. Warm, solid, real. And that was the moment. I leaned in. Or maybe he did. It doesn't matter. Our lips met, tentative, searching. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just quiet. Like two people trying to remember what it felt like to be wanted. I felt his hand on my cheek, and I closed my eyes. Let the ache melt into something softer. Let the guilt drown under the weight of something that finally felt alive. We didn't speak. He didn't ask for more. But I gave it. Because in that moment, wrapped in candlelight and shadows, he wasn't my son's friend. He was the first person in years who made me feel like me. And I was so tired of pretending that didn't matter. When I woke up the next morning, I wasn't in his arms. There were no whispered promises, no dramatic confessions. Just the sound of birds outside the window. And the crushing weight of what I'd done. Mark was still asleep when I slipped back into our bedroom. He didn't stir. Didn't roll over. Didn't notice the cold side of the bed. He hadn't noticed a lot of things for a long time. I stood there, watching him. This man I'd built a life with. And all I felt was numb. Not hate. Not love. Just the dull throb of something broken that neither of us wanted to fix anymore. Over the next few days, there were glances. Small touches passed like secrets in the hallway. A brush of hands as we reached for the same dish. A soft smile from across the dinner table. Moments that would seem innocent to anyone else. But to us, they were everything. And yet, the guilt didn't go away. It clung to me. Like smoke from a fire I'd started and couldn't put out. Every time I laughed at Jake's joke, I caught myself looking around. Every time Mark touched my arm or kissed my cheek, I wanted to flinch. Because I was living two lives. And one of them was burning the other down. I told myself it was a one-time thing. That it meant nothing. That I was just lost for a moment. But the truth? It meant everything. And I couldn't stop thinking about the way Jake had looked at me. Like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Like I was whole. We became experts at hiding. At making eye contact without making it mean anything in front of others. At passing each other like strangers while every nerve in my body burned to touch him. It was like we had this secret song only we could hear. A rhythm just beneath the surface of everyday life. But you can't fake stillness forever. Not when the current under the surface starts pulling you deeper. It started with little things. Mark, he wasn't dumb. Detached, yes. But not stupid. One morning I was making breakfast. Pancakes, his favorite, something I hadn't done in months. And he looked up from his phone, tilted his head, and said, "You're glowing lately. New moisturizer?" I laughed it off, said something about drinking more water. But my hands trembled when I flipped the next pancake. Because it wasn't the water. It was the way Jake had whispered my name the night before. The way his hands knew the curve of my body like they'd been made for it. Then came my son. One afternoon, he came home earlier than expected from class. I was in the living room, and Jake, he was helping me fix the bookshelf. We were standing too close. I knew that, but it was habit by then. Comfort. And when my son walked in, his eyes narrowed, just for a second. Not enough to say anything, but enough to feel it. That shift. That crack in the air. Later that night, over dinner, he asked Jake, "Hey, man. Everything good? You've been, I don't know, off lately." Jake didn't flinch. Just smiled, shrugged. Just tired. Finals, you know. But I knew that look. That suspicion. That doubt, crawling under his skin like a warning. And suddenly, the walls of my house didn't feel so safe anymore. Jake started pulling me in closer. More texts. More stolen moments. He wanted to go out. To places we could hold hands. Laugh out loud. Be real. He didn't understand that we weren't in a romance. We were in a disaster waiting to happen. One night, after Mark went to bed, Jake came into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I don't like pretending anymore," he said. And for a second, I hated him for saying it. Because pretending was the only thing keeping my world from shattering. I remember pouring a glass of red wine. I didn't even sip it, just held it in both hands like a shield. "I have a family," I said quietly. "This isn't a movie, Jake." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "No, it's not. But it feels more real than anything I've ever had." I looked at him, this boy, this man, with eyes that saw right through me. And the truth was, I didn't have a counterargument. Because he was right. When I was with him, I felt like I'd stepped out of a fog I didn't know I was living in. But when I wasn't, the guilt was a scream I swallowed every day. I couldn't sleep. I started walking around at night, barefoot on the cold tile floors, listening to my thoughts echo off the walls. I stared at photos on the mantle, me, Mark, and our son on vacation. Smiling, sun-kissed, happy. But now all I saw was what we'd lost. Not because of Jake. Because somewhere along the way, we stopped choosing each other. And I was too afraid to admit it. There was one moment that nearly broke me. A Sunday morning. We were all at the breakfast table, Mark, my son, Jake, and me. Mark was reading the paper. My son scrolling through his phone. Jake looked at me across the table. Just one look. And in it, everything was there. Longing, regret, sadness, and something that almost looked like love. My throat tightened. I dropped my spoon. It clattered on the floor. Everyone looked at me. "You okay?" Mark asked. I nodded too quickly. Just tired. But inside, I was crumbling. Because I couldn't live in both worlds forever. And sooner or later, one of them would come crashing down. Jake wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man who wanted more than midnight shadows and whispered goodbyes. And I wasn't strong enough to stop. But I wasn't strong enough to keep going either. I was living in limbo. Too afraid to leave. Too far gone to go back. And every day, the guilt wrapped tighter around my ribs. Until even breathing felt like betrayal. I hadn't planned to go in. It was a Sunday. Quiet. Mark was out running errands. I had just finished folding laundry. My son's bedroom door was slightly ajar, music drifting out, low and pulsing. I knocked. Gently. No answer. But the door wasn't closed. And I don't know why I stepped in. Habit, maybe? A mother's instinct. Or maybe a part of me already knew something was about to unravel. What I saw. I dropped the glass in my hand. It hit the floor with a high, breaking sound that didn't even register at first. Because everything else, my breath, my body, the world around me, had frozen. My son, my baby, was standing in the middle of the room. And Jake was standing with him. Their hands were on each other. Their lips locked in a kiss that wasn't confused, or hesitant, or impulsive. It was deep, real, intimate. I must have gasped. I don't remember. But they pulled apart, violently, like they'd been burned. My son's eyes were wide, shocked. Jake looked at me like a man caught in a dream he thought was safe. And I just stood there. The world didn't just spin. It cracked, right down the middle of my chest. I turned, walked out. I didn't even hear them calling after me. If they did, it didn't register. I went to the laundry room, locked the door, and pressed my back to it like I could hold the entire house together with just my spine. I must have stayed there for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Heart pounding. Mouth dry. Mind racing through memories I didn't know how to process anymore. Later that night, Jake came to find me. The house was quiet. Mark still hadn't returned. He knocked on my bedroom door. I let him in. He stood there, hands trembling at his sides, face pale. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. I laughed. "A bitter, broken thing. Hurt me," I whispered. "Jake, you've torn me into pieces I didn't even know I had." He stepped forward. "No. Don't try to explain." "I need to know the truth," I said. "You used me. His face contorted like I'd slapped him. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Diane, I didn't use you. I cared about you." I felt the tears coming, but I refused to let them fall. "You cared about me?" I repeated, my voice thick. "Then what was that? What were we?" He looked at the floor, then back at me. "I care about him too," he said. "I didn't plan it. I didn't expect it. But it's not fake. It's not some game." That was the moment the ground gave way. Because it wasn't just that he had touched me. It wasn't just that he had kissed me, undressed me, whispered things into the hollow of my throat that made me feel alive again. It was that he'd done it all, while being in love with my son. And I had been blind. To Jake's confusion, to the glances he gave my son that lingered a little too long, to the way his smile dimmed whenever the three of us were in the same room. I hadn't seen it, because I hadn't wanted to. I told him to leave. That night. That second. He begged me not to. Asked if we could talk again. Sort things out. But I couldn't breathe with him in the room. I stood there, arms crossed so tight across my chest they ached. "You need to go," I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded, eyes full of guilt. Or was it love? I didn't know anymore. After he left, I sat at the edge of my bed until morning. My son never came to me. We didn't speak. The next day, Jake's things were gone. His room, empty. Like he'd never been there at all. But his absence echoed louder than any footsteps ever had. And in the middle of that silence, I realized I wasn't the only one who had been living a lie. We all were. I lost both of them, just like that. No warning, no roadmap. My son wouldn't speak to me. Not a word. He moved back to campus early. Left his laundry in the basket. Left his silence in every corner of this house. And Jake moved out that night. No goodbye. No note. The guest room stood still, stripped, too neat. His scent still lingered in the pillowcases. I was alone, in a house full of echoes. The mornings were the worst, because I'd wake up for half a second, before the weight of everything came crashing back. And I'd remember. My son, disgusted. My husband, oblivious. My reflection, unrecognizable. I tried to fix it. At first. I texted my son. Called. Left voicemails that grew shakier with each one. I told him I was sorry. That I was confused. That I never meant for it to happen. But all I got was silence. He blocked my number. Unfollowed me on every app. Even changed the Netflix password. It sounds petty, I know. But those things? They hurt in ways you can't explain. I started writing. At first, just one sentence a day. Today, I miss who I thought I was. Then a page. Then two. I wrote about the loneliness. The ache of being invisible in your own marriage. The way Jake made me feel seen, not just as a woman, but as a person. I wrote about the guilt. The way it followed me like a shadow. Dark, cold, always there. I didn't just lose them. I lost the illusion of who I thought I was. The perfect wife. The good mother. The woman who followed all the rules and still went to bed every night feeling hollow. I had to begin again. One brutal truth at a time. I went to therapy. Reluctantly, at first. I thought I'd just cry through a few sessions and leave. But something about that small room. About someone actually listening without judging. It broke something open in me. We didn't start with Jake. We started with me. With my parents. My marriage. My patterns. Why I always gave until I was empty. Why I mistook attention for affection. Why silence, mine and Mark's, felt safer than honesty. I started noticing things I never had before. Like how often I said I'm fine when I wasn't. How long I'd been living for everyone else. How deeply I'd neglected the parts of me that still wanted love, passion, meaning. I don't know if I'll ever get my son back. Some breaks, they don't heal the way you want them to. But I do know this. I'm not that same woman anymore. I don't shrink in my skin. I don't apologize for needing connection. And I've stopped chasing people who need me to disappear in order for them to stay. I made mistakes. Big ones. But I also found something in the rubble. Me. Not the mother. Not the wife. Just Diane. And she's not perfect. But she's learning. And for the first time in a long time, she's not hiding. 1 year. A whole year. Since the night everything broke open. Since the silence swallowed my house and left me alone with nothing but questions and memories that didn't sit quite right anymore. And yet, here I was. A folding chair. A paper program in my lap. Surrounded by proud parents clapping, cheering, snapping photos. I didn't bring a camera. Didn't bring Mark either. He didn't ask to come. I didn't ask him to. We were still married, technically. But what we had left didn't really look like a marriage anymore. More like a polite arrangement. My son's name echoed through the loudspeaker. I stood, clapped, smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, just didn't want to. And that's okay. I was there. That's all I could give him. That and space. The ceremony ended. People swarmed the field like bees. I stayed back. Didn't want to be in the crowd. Just watched. Let myself breathe. That's when I saw him. Jake. He hadn't changed much. But also, somehow, everything about him had. His face was leaner. His posture more certain. He walked like someone who'd survived something. Maybe we both had. He was standing near the oak trees, talking with a small group. And then, he turned. And our eyes met. No words, no nod, no smile. Just a moment, a stillness. A pause between two chapters of a story that had once burned too hot and too fast. There wasn't pain in that glance. Not anymore. There was recognition. Of what we were. Of what we'd never be again. There was no hate. No regret. Just a soft goodbye. He turned away first. And I let him. Because I wasn't the woman who needed his eyes to feel visible anymore. I wasn't looking for closure. Not from him. Not even from my son. I'd stopped chasing things that didn't want to be held. Some stories don't end with a kiss. Or a second chance. Or a neat little vow. Some end with a quiet understanding. And a promise to never forget. Not because you want to relive it. But because it taught you something you didn't know you needed to learn. That was my story. Not perfect. Not pretty. But mine. And I'm still writing the rest. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Someone who wasn't meant to be in your story, but somehow became the most vivid chapter? Would you risk everything you've built, everything you thought you were, just for a glimpse of something real? I did. And it cost me more than I ever imagined. But it also taught me what it means to be truly seen. This isn't just my story. It's a story many of us carry in silence. The moments we stumble, the choices that shatter us, the love that confuses and consumes. So, if you've ever felt that ache, that confusion, or if you know someone who's been there, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk. Because sometimes, just knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing. And if you want more stories that peel back the layers of secrets, lies, and heartache, stories that no one else dares to tell, subscribe to Cheating Confession Diary. Here, we don't judge. We listen. We understand. Because every confession has a story. And every story deserves to be heard. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. Until next time, take care of your heart.